Enter an authentic medieval tavern and discard all cinematic portrayals. This isn't a welcoming hearth with a genial innkeeper, but rather a reeking, sweltering abyss. A foul, airless cavity where the ground yields beneath your steps. Smoke assails your respiratory system, and every individual present is assessing if you present a worthwhile target for theft. The gambling never ceases, blades are ever present, and the contagion permeating this atmosphere will claim more lives tonight than any weapon. Here, empires collapse due to minor altercations, and wealth disappears between dusk and dawn, where corpses grow cold in secluded spots, and no one bothers to inquire. If you entered believing this was merely a spot for a beverage, you've already committed your initial error. Tonight we'll force that door open and remain until daybreak. You'll experience the true scent of these chambers, what they genuinely reeked of. You'll sample the libations that sustain common folk, even as they internally decayed. You'll encounter the individuals who commanded these dim spaces, the innkeepers extorting every last coin from desperate patrons, the soldiers with no remaining hope, the clergy concealing transgressions, more profound than the very chambers they condemned, the women ensnared in a situation they never consented to, and the brigands capable of relieving you of your valuables and slitting your windpipe before you completed a thought. You will occupy tables where a solitary throw of the dice ruined whole households. You will stand amidst pandemonium and observe how a single ill-chosen remark transforms merriment into homicide. And when dawn eventually pierces those grimy panes, you will tally the deceased, for every soul who enters such an establishment incurs a cost. Before we step across that entrance together, share your city and nation in the comments section. I'm eager to learn your current viewing location. If this historical perspective resonates deeply with you, as it ought to, subscribe immediately and support this channel's continued exploration into the obscure. You're watching Ancestral, and no other historical broadcast delves to this extent. You force the door ajar, and the initial sensation isn't auditory, it's the stench. It assails your face like a physical barrier. Warm, damp, dense perspiration, smoke, stale ale, and an underlying putrefaction. It saturates your lungs so densely you could almost masticate it. Your eyes begin to sting, your chest constricts. For a fleeting moment, you contemplate turning back and retreating into the frigid, refuse-strewn thoroughfare. However, you've been journeying since dawn. Your limbs ache intensely, you're famished, soaked, and utterly spent, compelling you to enter. The low ceiling almost presses upon your head. You could easily extend your hand and graze your knuckles on the sooty rafters, which decades of smoke have transformed into the hue of ancient skeletal remains. Suspended from these, you discern cured provisions, clusters of botanicals, braided strings of alliums, and forms you hope never to perceive distinctly. Each surface is coated with an unknown film. Every dark corner conceals something more sinister. You perceive heavy footsteps, the grating of seating, and an overly boisterous, prolonged cackle. A man coughs violently, as if on his deathbed, where he's seated. From the darkness, a dog's growl emerges, and in a corner, someone chokes. In establishments such as this, the ground isn't typically a proper floor. It's merely compacted soil, blanketed by old rushes and dried grass, laid down to absorb any spills. Proprietors are meant to replace these regularly. However, they never do. These rushes remain for weeks, even months. Ale, wine, perspiration, vomit, and grease seep into them, causing decay, alongside the bones of dead vermin from previous meals. Stale bread crusts, hard as rock, and broken teeth, expelled by someone post-brawl, litter the ground. Your boot might sink into a yielding patch, then abruptly crush something brittle. Even the more upscale establishments feature wooden floorboards, which might suggest cleanliness. Yet this is deceptive. These planks are blackened by ancient, unidentifiable stains. Everywhere one observes knife marks, deep cuts in the tables, gashes on the floor indicating brutal brawls, and profound fissures where chairs were shattered over heads. Tankards, aimed at faces, instead embedded themselves in the wood. With close inspection, traces of dried blood can still be discerned within the timber's grain. No one ever cleaned it thoroughly. The walls offer no improvement. Most of these structures are constructed from wattle and daub, using slender branches interwoven. These are then coated with mud, straw, and animal waste. While this construction keeps out the wind, it provides no defense against winter dampness, causing water to condense and trickle down the interior. It's as if the structure perspires. In summer, the walls absorb heat and radiate it back, while a layer of grease and soot covers every surface. What was once a light brown hue has become a glossy black. Occasionally, an attempt at civility is evident, a crude depiction of a saint overseeing the space, or a panel illustrating a monarch on horseback. In less refined areas, a simple shield bearing a lion or a cross might be displayed. Should the proprietor disregard ecclesiastical opinion, one might encounter different kinds of images. Depictions of intertwined bodies, drinking games, and crude jests are carved into the wood, in spots a priest would never inspect. Within these confines, light signifies survival. The primary fire either blazes in a central pit or rages against a wall. Its flames cast orange and red hues across faces, creating profound, shifting shadows as individuals stir. Under such illumination, a man's smile appears as a baring of teeth, and an elderly woman's sudden squint transforms her into a nightmarish figure. This fire is indispensable. It warms the stew, dries damp cloaks, and prevents hypothermia during harsh winters. Yet it also poses a constant, deadly threat. A single spark landing on dry thatch could instantly turn the entire establishment into a tomb. Candles waver on tables, and oil lamps sputter on shelves. Their illumination barely penetrates the gloom. Tallow candles, crafted from animal fat, emit a greasy smoke that permeates the atmosphere, suffocating the air, as no proper chimney exists. The smoke ascends, strikes the ceiling, and disperses like a mist. Eventually, it finds its way out through roof cracks or an opening in the thatch. Until that inhales it, everyone inhales it. Newcomers gasp for breath, while regulars no longer even perceive it. You stand blinking through watering eyes, awaiting forms to emerge from the dimness. At a particular table, faces gradually become visible. Merchants huddle together, speaking rapidly. Their attire surpasses that of others present, featuring dyed materials and fur-trimmed collars. Their bulging coin purses attract notice. One hand clutches a drink, while the other remains firmly on their money. Close to the fire, soldiers in tattered cloaks are slumped over their beverages. Road mud still cakes their boots. One soldier bears a facial scar so recent it retains a pink hue. Their weapons lie on the bench, readily accessible. They chuckle at humor, yet fall silent the moment someone approaches too closely. Though appearing at ease, they are not. Instead, they are meticulously assessing every potential danger. They observe every chance and every vulnerability within the space. Near the wall, pilgrims gather, their cloaks adorned with badges from sacred sites and shells from far-off sanctuaries. Small tin tokens bearing saintly images are visible. Some whisper prayers, gripping their rosaries tightly, while others drink heavily and flirt with the serving staff. Not all who display these emblems acquired them legitimately. Craftsmen occupy close-knit clusters, a blacksmith whose hands are scarred by burns, and a tanner whose attire reveals his trade before he utters a word. Also present is a weaver, his fingers stained with ink from recording orders. They dispute guild matters, discussing overdue contracts and payments that were pledged but never materialized. Their conversations ebb and flow, punctuated by the sound of clinking tankards. And then there are those individuals who seem as if they are fixtures of the establishment. These are the locals, their faces etched by age, with missing teeth and eyes that have witnessed famine, plague, and conflict sweep through like storms. When they laugh, it lacks any genuine warmth. Having lived in close proximity to death, they ceased to be astonished by it long ago. The person who maintains order amidst all this, through sheer determination, is the tavern keeper, typically a large individual. His arms are muscular from moving barrels and ejecting unruly patrons. His apron bears the marks of countless spilled meals, and his shirt hangs unbuttoned, sweat glistening on his skin. Having stood by the fire since midday, he recognizes every patron. He recalls who has settled their debts, who is indebted, and who causes disturbances but spends sufficiently to be tolerated. He knows who instigates brawls without ever purchasing a beverage. Within these premises, his decree holds greater authority than any law officer's. He determines who receives service and who is refused. He dictates who is forcibly removed and left in the mud if he deems it appropriate. He also determines which offenses are reported to the authorities and which are merely concealed under new floor rushes. Should he have a wife, she manages half of this establishment independently. She prepares food, handles the finances, monitors the entrance, and fends off intoxicated hands that stray inappropriately. A wooden spoon in her grasp is capable of breaking ribs with enough force to make a statement. She observes more than she speaks, aware of who is deceiving whom. She knows who intends to flee the town, who received payment today, and who is on the verge of desperate actions after one more difficult night. She is the individual truly to be feared. This space may appear disorderly, but it is not chaotic. It operates according to principles more ancient than any royal decree. Here, one's lineage holds less significance than one's conduct. A man of humble means, who settles his debts and remains silent, will invariably secure a place. Conversely, a wealthy individual who offends the wrong person will be removed from the premises feet first. Each evening, social standing is re-established through currency, alcohol, brawls, and apprehension. Yet prior to entering such an establishment, one must select which entrance to pass through. For in the medieval era, not all public houses are alike. An incorrect choice could lead to slumbering in a bed infested with vermin. You might overpay significantly or awaken in a backstreet with a fractured cranium. At the pinnacle of options is the inn, which most closely resembles genuine accommodation. Constructed for wayfarers, it offers sustenance, beverages, stabling for your mount, and a designated sleeping area. The finest examples are multi-story stone structures. Some might even feature a courtyard. They are typically situated by city entrances, at river fords, and along well-traveled routes. Upon entering a reputable inn, you will instantly perceive the distinction. More robust construction and an exterior painted sign depicting an animal, a holy figure, or another familiar emblem. The clientele is more elegantly attired, comprising merchants, messengers, and pilgrims possessing genuine wealth. You might even observe respectable dining utensils. Occasionally, real glass panes adorn the windows. However, comfort has its limits. Privacy, as you comprehend it, is non-existent. Your payment secures a spot, not a private chamber. You and a dozen strangers might share the same bed, a single mattress accommodating multiple bodies. If you are prudent, you will sleep with your boots on, your belt cinched tightly, and your coin held close to your person. Fail to do so, and you may awaken to find possessions gone. These sleeping arrangements consist of wooden frames, fitted with ropes or leather thongs. Upon this rests a substantial bag filled with straw, feathers, or the most economical material available that year, rarely ever replaced. It harbors pests, fleas, lice, and bedbugs that feast upon you throughout the night. There are no means to eradicate them, nor any proper facilities for personal hygiene. You will itch and endure, or surrender and rest on the ground. The clamor is incessant. Men snore like expiring beasts. One mutters in his slumber, while another coughs so violently you question if he will survive until dawn. You detect the odor of unwashed bodies crammed together, moist wool, and the unemptied chamber pot in the corner. Nevertheless, for the majority of travelers, this remains preferable to sleeping outdoors, where brigands, wolves, or worse dangers await. Beneath the inn's status lies the tavern. Its primary offering is wine, not the everyday beverage, but costly imported varieties that signify one's affluence. In medieval Europe, wine denotes social standing. It originates from distant French vineyards, German valleys, and southern regions blessed with abundant sunshine. Transporting it to a northern urban center involves maritime shipping, tariffs, and intermediaries' payoffs, all contributing to its high price. Within a wine tavern, you will discern foreign inflections and observe meticulously chosen attire. The patrons here are likely affluent. Their wealth, however, renders them vulnerable. They sip from goblets that could be pewter or silver, debating freight expenses, royal levies, and outstanding debts. Meticulous record-keeping is crucial. Casks are tallied, seals are verified, and quantities are precisely gauged. Since wine holds significant value, it's closely monitored. Municipal authorities are concerned about deception, as tavern owners frequently feel compelled to dilute their quality stock. They might mix inexpensive wine with costly varieties, or even adulterate whole barrels with substances unfit for human consumption. Discovery leads to widespread disgrace. Punishments include the stocks, the pillory, and having the spoiled barrel emptied over one's head to the cheers of onlookers. To prevent such deceptions, patrons are entitled to request verification. Should a purchaser harbor suspicions, they are permitted to inspect the specific barrel in the cellar. This explains why numerous taverns feature extensive, cool, subterranean chambers filled with barrels. Far from the commotion, the establishment's true prize matures undisturbed. Officials, recognized for assessing quality, could visit to sample and declare their judgment. On the streets, a highly regarded tavern flourishes, while one publicly denounced typically fails within a season. As time progresses, numerous wine establishments grow, incorporating provisions like food and bread. They offer cheese and stews, and begin to carry cider or mead. If trade is robust, they even provide lodging. At this point, the distinction becomes unclear. Is it a tavern or an inn? To the patron, these classifications are less significant than a single factor: cost. At the lowest rung of the hierarchy is the alehouse, frequently a private residence converted into a semi-public venue. A woman produces more ale than her household requires, selling the surplus. She displays a branch, broom, or cloth outside her entrance as a sign. There's no painted placard. It's simply a notice to the community: fresh ale available. Ale serves as the beverage for ordinary folk. Children consume it, as do laborers. The elderly drink it. Indeed, everyone partakes, given that ordinary water can be lethal. The alehouse is a community hub where everyone is acquainted with names and families. Debts and secrets are shared. The space is confined, the hearth unassuming, with perhaps one or two tables at most. Yet for the local street, this establishment represents the heart of all activity. The alewife acts as both hostess and arbiter. She extends credit to those she trusts, but dismisses individuals who perpetually pledge future payment. The following week, she is aware of who abuses his spouse, who pilfers from his master, and who intends to flee the town without settling their debts. To truly comprehend that community, your initial conversation should be with her. Even these unpretentious venues are subject to legal oversight. Authorities establish pricing and quality benchmarks via regulations, such as the assize of bread and ale. The price of ale is directly linked to the price of grain. Officials known as ale tasters or ale conners travel from one location to another, evaluating the beverages on offer. Should they discover diluted beer or overcharging, swift retribution ensues: stocks, pillories, and ducking stools that plunge the transgressor into icy water, repeatedly, as the onlookers roar with amusement. Therefore, a choice confronts you. Do you proceed to the Stone Inn, paying a premium for a bed infested with vermin? Or do you enter the wine tavern and hazard your funds amidst shrewd traders and seasoned gamblers? Alternatively, do you slip into the confined alehouse, where every individual is familiar with one another, and you, an outsider, are conspicuously noticeable, like a flame in the gloom? Make the incorrect decision, and you forfeit your belongings, your well-being, and your very existence. If you make the correct choice, a crucial final query remains. What will you consume in a world where water itself spells doom? That's our next topic. For every beverage served on these tables conceals a harsh reality. In medieval Europe, alcohol isn't merely for enjoyment. It represents the slender, desperate boundary separating another day's survival from perishing before dawn. You collapse onto a rough wooden bench, and before you can recover your composure, someone poses the sole pertinent question in this place. What will you have to drink? You might assume water is the sensible reply, but in this era, that's the quickest path to death. The river flowing nearby isn't simply a waterway. It serves as the city's communal dumping ground for refuse, waste, laundry, animal remains, and the direct emptying of chamber pots. Canners steep their animal skins within it. Dyers discharge their toxic chemicals into its flow, and butchers allow blood to drain from gutters directly into the stream. Wells are dug perilously near graves and septic pits, while rainwater collection barrels turn green with algae and teem with insect larvae. The concept of bacteria is entirely unknown. Yet a universal truth is understood. Consume that untreated water, and your internal organs will be ravaged. This explains why the table before you is laden with tankards of ale, wine, cider, and mead, beverages that could sustain your life. Here, alcohol is not a source of enjoyment. It functions as medicine. It's a means of survival. Children consume diluted ale, elderly women partake, and workers drink it at sunrise, midday, and sunset. Going a day without a beverage isn't temperance. It's a self-inflicted demise born of unawareness. Most of what you'd find in a typical inn is ale. Discard any preconceived notions. Forget sparkling golden liquid in pristine glassware. Medieval ale is dense, opaque, lukewarm, and contains various suspended particles. It's more akin to a meal than a beverage. The process of making ale starts in the fields. Barley is gathered, steeped in water until germination occurs, then dried using heat, which converts its starch into sugar. The malt is then ground and combined with hot water, yielding a sweet liquid known as wort. In an era devoid of thermometers, brewers assess the temperature by hand. This is done through years of accumulated instinct. If it's too hot, the yeast perishes. If too cold, no fermentation occurs. Yeast itself remains an enigma. Its living nature is unknown. There are no commercially packaged yeasts or laboratory-cultivated strains. Instead, wild yeasts float in from the atmosphere. These yeasts adhere to aged wooden implements, infiltrate the wort, and begin transforming sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide. Their cooperation is inconsistent. The outcome can be either palatable and pleasant to drink, or so acidic it causes a grimace. In numerous areas, an ancient herbal blend known as gruit is still employed. Rather than using hops, they incorporate marsh plants, yarrow, heather, or any local flora. These additions alter both the taste and the impact. Certain plants induce calmness, while others can cause agitation, aggression, or dizziness. Each household closely protects its unique recipe, with the alewife typically overseeing this process. Brewing isn't merely a hobby, it's essential for survival. A skilled alewife secures loyalty, drawing back her neighbors, who then promote her reputation. Conversely, an incompetent alewife becomes the subject of ridicule and penalties. Fresh ale has a short shelf life. Within days, it begins to turn sour and peculiar. This necessitates continuous brewing. Buckets, tubs, and barrels occupy every nook, each at varying stages of production. The atmosphere within a brewery is redolent with the scent of damp grain and vigorous fermentation, and the floors are slippery. The fire remains perpetually lit. The labor is arduous and ceaseless. Every batch is categorized by its potency. The initial liquid extracted from the mash yields the most potent ale, while subsequent extractions produce a less robust variety, a light beer, possessing minimal alcoholic content, yet still safer to consume than water. Children and laborers consume this beverage throughout the day. The potent ale, however, is sold or reserved for significant events. Ale costs less than wine, but authorities still monitor its production. The cost of grain dictates all aspects. When crops fail, famine ensues, prompting officials to establish set prices for ale, correlating with grain expenses. They also mandate a minimum alcoholic content. Inspectors appear unannounced. They sample and assess. Should the ale be found weak or excessively priced, swift retribution follows. Men are confined to the stocks. Women are secured into ducking chairs and submerged into icy water, as the community observes and jeers. The onlookers relish the spectacle. The underlying warning is unmistakable. Deceive your patrons and you will become the public display. Wine exists in a completely distinct realm. While ale is for the masses, wine serves as the fluid emblem of power, religion, and wealth. It circulates within ecclesiastical institutions, royal residences, and affluent households. The casks found in this establishment could have traversed vast oceans. They could originate from southern France, the Rhine valleys, or Iberian vineyards ripened under distant suns. Each stage of such a voyage incurs expenses. Currency, harvesters, transporters, mariners, port authorities, revenue agents, and intermediaries who profit at every opportunity. By the moment a cask arrives in the cellar of an English public house, its contents possess significantly greater value than an equivalent quantity of ale. Wine traders have the potential to amass considerable wealth. They establish extensive networks spanning multiple kingdoms. They are multilingual, aware of which aristocratic families are in conflict, which taxes have recently doubled, and which ports are under blockade. Wine is more than merely a beverage. It represents information and influence. Within the tavern, wine flows from cask to pitcher to goblet, presenting varieties that are robust, tart, or sweet, dark, or pale. No singular variety exists. Certain wines are crafted to mature and enhance over time, while others are straightforward and best enjoyed when young. Barrels can leak, and their contents may spoil. Fine wine can transform into vinegar in a single night. Deception is pervasive. Dishonest vendors dilute premium inventory. They combine inexpensive and costly varieties, marketing the mixture as superior. They tint light-colored wines to appear more opulent. They conceal tainted wine using honey or various spices. Some fabricate whole barrels by blending inferior liquids with additives designed to imitate genuine taste and color. Municipal authorities endeavor to monitor this. Quality control officers sample and evaluate the merchandise. Street criers declare prices and sources. Their pronouncements can make or break an inn. Dishonest traders, if apprehended, incur penalties and public disgrace, potentially finding themselves confined to a pillory. Simultaneously, their deceitful wine is poured over their heads, transforming their merchandise into their penalty. Nevertheless, wine continues to attract individuals. For numerous imbibers, a single drink isn't primarily about taste. Rather, it's about experiencing a fleeting sense of significance, mimicking the customs of clergy, aristocracy, and royalty. Next, we have mead, a beverage composed of honey, water, and yeast. While this may seem straightforward, honey is an expensive commodity, requiring either beekeeping or purchase. Sourced from those who brave stings and theft to gather it, honey serves purposes in medicine, candle making, and food sweetening, thereby rendering mead a luxurious item in northern regions. Individuals link it to valiant fighters, grand banquets, and memorable occasions. Brewers dissolve honey in water, apply heat, and then allow it to ferment. Spices, herbs, or fruit may be incorporated. Certain meads are robust and potent, producing a burning sensation upon consumption, while others are more delicate and sugary. Meads matured over extended periods acquire intricate flavors, yet aging demands both ample space and considerable patience, resources only available to a select few households. One might encounter mead in a reputable establishment. It might be found on a sacred day or within a well-connected trading hub. In impoverished areas, its presence is uncommon, and when it does surface, people regard it with reverence. Cider and perry occupy an intermediate position. In regions abundant with orchards, where apple trees blanket the hills, crushed fruit undergoes fermentation. This process occurs nearly as spontaneously as grain brewing. Apples are pressed, Their juice is kept in barrels, and yeasts initiate fermentation, yielding a product that can range from gentle to potent. It can be powerful enough to incapacitate individuals accustomed to daily ale consumption. Perry, crafted from pears, undergoes an identical process. These beverages embody the flavor of their native soil. In certain locales, they are commonplace at every meal, whereas elsewhere, they are considered exotic and costly. Availability fluctuates with the seasons. A bountiful autumn ensures an ample supply. A poor year, conversely, leads to shortages. Discovering them listed on an inn's menu serves as both an indication and an enticement. All these beverages, however, contend with identical issues. Their consistency is unreliable due to the absence of regulated yeast strains, precise measurement instruments, or airtight containers. Each production run varies. One cask might offer a smooth, palatable drink. The subsequent one, however, could be harsh and twice as potent. One might severely miscalculate, becoming significantly more intoxicated than intended. Furthermore, these drinks lack purity. While boiling for ale and mead eliminates numerous hazards, barrels and drinking vessels are seldom cleaned to an acceptable standard. Wild microorganisms, mold, and dirt adhere to all surfaces. Consuming these beverages is preferable to ingesting untreated water, yet safe is an inaccurate descriptor, and they possess an undeniable addictive quality. A worker often experiences pain after a grueling day. Ale alleviates the discomfort. A soldier, tormented by his experiences, drinks until his recollections dim. A woman toiling from sunrise to sunset, her sole respite comes from a surreptitiously consumed drink in a secluded spot. The distinction between maintaining hydration and fleeing from reality quickly blurs after several servings. Your stomach rumbles. The innkeeper observes. The fare served in this room isn't designed to dazzle. Its purpose is to sate your hunger and encourage further purchases. A large cauldron typically occupies the heart of numerous tavern kitchens. Within it, you'll find pottage, the common stew of this era. No specific recipe exists. The cook simply incorporates water, broth, or any available liquid, then adds grains and vegetables. Any leftover meat or bone fragments are also included. The pot remains over the fire for extended periods. In certain establishments, it never completely cools, with fresh components added as older servings are dished out. Its foundation consists of inexpensive grains like barley, oats, or cracked wheat. These ingredients serve to thicken the liquid and provide sustenance, simmering until they disintegrate. This process transforms the broth into a thick, pulpy consistency. Vegetables are then introduced. Onions, leeks, cabbage, turnips, carrots, anything that is currently in season or can be preserved. During autumn, the selection is extensive, but by late winter, it diminishes to withered roots and softened, stored cabbage. The chef removes any apparent spoilage before adding the remainder. High temperatures conceal numerous imperfections. The meat you receive is seldom a prime cut. It might be aged, fibrous, or sourced from an already ailing animal. While the affluent purchase superior cuts at the market, taverns acquire the remnants: feet, heads, organs, and gristle. Prolonged boiling renders all these components tender. This process integrates them into the stew. The flavor might be tolerable, but the underlying truth is often less appealing. Occasionally, the animal providing the meat did not perish intentionally. A cow or pig that suddenly collapses could still be slaughtered due to urgent need. Such meat might not find its way to reputable establishments, often ending up in a tavern's cooking pot. While prolonged cooking eliminates many hazards, not all issues are resolved by heat. During periods of religious fasting, fish substitutes for meat, though fresh fish is uncommon. Away from coastal areas or significant waterways, the majority of fish in inland taverns is preserved through salting, drying, or smoking until it becomes rock hard. It requires soaking. Then, it must be cooked for several hours to render it palatable. The consistency is chewy, and the taste is strong and frequently disagreeable, yet it provides sustenance. Salt is a valuable commodity, frequently subject to taxation. It is used to cure meat and fish, meaning preserved provisions are heavily laden with it, and consuming them intensifies your thirst. Consequently, you purchase additional beverages, allowing the tavern owner to profit twofold. Bread accompanies your meal. In an affluent home, you might encounter freshly baked white loaves. However, here you receive rough brown bread, crafted from various grains. It could be several days old, firm at the crust, and speckled with fragments of husk and grit from rudimentary grinding. Bread frequently functions as your eating surface. Substantial slices known as trenchers are placed on the table, upon which stew and meat are heaped. By the meal's conclusion, the bread has absorbed grease, broth, and gravy. You have the option to consume it or discard it. In certain locales, the remnants are given to the impoverished. Elsewhere, they are returned directly to the cooking pot. Cheese occasionally makes an appearance. It might be fresh and tender. This fresh cheese is intended for immediate consumption, or it could be hard and matured, robust enough for transport. Its quality is contingent upon the animals and the hygiene of its production. The artisan's expertise also plays a role. A fine cheese is a prized possession, whereas an inferior one emits an odor of decomposition and has a flavor akin to a penalty. Eggs might be boiled, fried, or added directly to the stew, yet they quickly spoil in warm conditions due to the absence of refrigeration. A single spoiled egg has the potential to contaminate an entire pot, causing widespread illness. The kitchen environment itself poses risks, as the concept of cross-contamination is not grasped. Uncooked meat shares a cutting surface with bread. Knives transition from carving to slicing without proper cleaning, and hands are merely wiped on aprons instead of being washed with soap and warm water. Flies alight indiscriminately. Dining is a shared experience, with bowls, trenchers, spoons, and cups passed among strangers, and all partake from common serving platters. Individuals suffering from a persistent cough, an unhealed wound, or an unidentified ailment freely share eating implements. This tavern serves as an ideal breeding ground for disease, allowing illness to spread easily from person to person. Nevertheless, for numerous individuals seated at your table, this substantial, warm stew represents the finest meal they will consume all this week. A simple meal of rough bread, a piece of cheese, and a draught of ale can determine whether one is able to work the next day or succumbs to exhaustion in the thoroughfare. This provides internal warmth in a chilly, humid environment, particularly in crowded urban areas where space is limited and fuel costly, leaving many without a personal fireplace sufficient for daily meal preparation. Consequently, they rely on taverns for their primary hot sustenance, a fact the tavern proprietor comprehends entirely. Sustenance is not merely an ancillary trade, it functions as a strategic tool. Overprice it and patrons will depart. Maintain a sufficiently low price and they will linger longer. They consume more, imbibe more, converse more, and wager more. As you eat, your attention is drawn to the adjacent table. Nearby, merchants discreetly discuss a recent delivery. Behind you, two construction workers dispute unpaid wages. By the hearth, a soldier recounts a battle tale, which captivates his listeners. A server glides by, expertly navigating between patrons' legs and spilled beverages, a tray held high with effortless balance. Her gaze constantly shifts, tallying faces and discerning temperaments. Your bowl becomes empty, your cup is repeatedly refilled, and your shoulders begin to relax. The surrounding clamor merges into an undifferentiated din. In a corner, a man sets down a pair of dice with a seemingly nonchalant gesture that belies its true intent, while another person deposits several coins. A third man draws closer to observe. The meal has served its purpose. You feel warm, satiated, and your vigilance is diminishing. At this point, the true contests commence, beyond mere dice and bets. These are contests of standing, of ego, of yearning, and ultimately of demise and bloodshed. For within these walls, after the feasting and imbibing conclude, the evening invariably takes one of two paths. You either depart under your own power, or you are borne out. The individual with the dice makes no grand introduction. He does not seek notice. Instead, he merely sets them upon the table and awaits. Coins materialize, and fingers rap against the wooden surface. A murmur suggests someone feels fortunate this evening. Two additional men pull their seats nearer. You discern the faint, hollow sound of bone dice clattering within the gambler's cupped hand. That distinct sound permeates all other noises in the chamber. This is where fortunes vanish. Medieval inns thrive on games of chance, such as dice and nascent card games. Wagers are placed on brawls, on any living creature. The church vehemently declares gambling a transgression, while governing bodies enact statutes and impose prohibitions. Yet none of this holds sway once currency hits the playing surface. Dice, typically 2 or 3 small blocks, are the preferred game, offering straightforward rules but countless paths to ruin. A typical variant unfolds as follows. A single participant declares a specific number, then attempts to achieve it with a roll, before encountering particular combinations that result in a loss. Others place their stakes on the outcome of his endeavor. Ancillary bets accumulate. Will he roll a pair? Will he falter within 3 tries? Can the subsequent player surpass his score? There's no codified rulebook, no established institution. Each inn operates with its unique rendition. The sole unchanging truth remains: the more time you spend at the gaming surface, the greater the probability you'll depart empty-handed. Observe the cubes carefully. They are not invariably fair. Some are subtly trimmed on one face, others are loaded with lead, and a few bear duplicate numerical markings. An adept swindler can subtly manipulate his wrist to influence the result without detection. True experts don't achieve massive wins instantaneously. Instead, they accumulate modest gains consistently over numerous evenings in various locales. Occasionally, they intentionally incur losses to appear innocuous. They jest and feign inebriation. They feign indignation if anyone implies foul play at their table. They depart before their modus operandi becomes too apparent. Playing cards are a more recent invention, but are rapidly gaining popularity. Decks lack uniformity. Suits, imagery, and regulations vary significantly across different territories. Certain games favor sequential arrangements. Other games, conversely, reward specific groupings. Individuals are already engaged in marking cards, arranging decks strategically, and dealing from the bottom. Should you be apprehended, the ensuing dispute can become deadly before a single sentence is completed. Not all forms of wagering necessitate apparatus. Some individuals bet on the duration a person can continue imbibing prior to their collapse. Others place stakes on arm wrestling matches, bare-knuckle brawls, or who can embed a blade nearest to a designated spot on a wall. Proprietors possessing wealth and ample room could potentially stage animal blood sports. Roosters savagely attacking one another, dogs confined to a pit. In more rugged or affluent areas, even bulls or bears might be tethered to stakes, as hounds assault them and men shout, brandishing currency. The cycle invariably recurs. Initially, laughter abounds, then the wagers escalate. A participant who ought to have ceased playing 3 rounds prior insists on just one more game. That final contest typically results in him losing his mantle, his footwear, his implements, or his steed. Life here is perilous. Debts incurred through gambling are not consistently safeguarded by formal statutes, yet they are upheld by a more direct means. This includes physical violence, edged weapons, and the assurance of future retribution. An individual who declines to settle his debt could face a beating, an ambush on the road later, or be branded as unreliable within every inn along that path. While the players concentrate on the game, others observe them. In a dimly lit corner, a pickpocket scrutinizes the assembly. He observes those displaying significant wealth, big winners, or men leaving in a rage. He also assesses each man's level of intoxication, their likely exit, and if they have companions close by. An expert pickpocket doesn't merely jostle and snatch. Within moments, they perform a mental assessment. Some of these criminals operate solo, while others function in groups, with one member perhaps accidentally spilling a drink on a mark. Alternatively, one might accidentally bump into the victim, with a second accomplice offering apologies and assistance to clean up the spill, all while deft hands sever the purse strings or delve into a cloak. Before the victim even realizes an item is gone, the thief could be far away or the victim deep in a drunken stupor. A significant number of these offenders do not fit the typical criminal stereotype. One might appear as a humble clerk, complete with ink-stained, neat attire. Another could masquerade as an itinerant merchant. A third individual might act as a boisterous drunkard, diverting attention. Meanwhile, their more discreet associate operates unnoticed. Women are not mere observers in this clandestine world. Some barmaids alert their partners or siblings when an affluent, unwary stranger takes a seat. Certain courtesans discreetly disclose which patrons possess additional money or precious belongings. Others navigate both sides, cautioning the tavern owner about perilous individuals. This is often done in return for safeguarding. However, for innumerable women within medieval taverns, peril isn't a secondary concern. It's an intrinsic part of their daily labor. Prostitution and taverns are intrinsically linked. While the church officially denounces commercial sex, numerous towns, in reality, either permit or even govern it. Authorities often conclude that confining prostitution to specific districts helps avert more serious offenses in other locations. Some municipalities grant licenses to brothels, whereas in other areas, taverns subtly evolve into the primary rendezvous point for affluent men and women with no alternative recourse. The women found in these establishments seldom arrive by choice. They are driven by destitution, perhaps a deceased spouse, no dowry, or an absence of family support. They might have hungry children, or their standing could be ruined by an attack or enticement. Once a woman transgresses that boundary, society frequently denies her any return. Opportunities for marriage disappear, and securing employment that provides a living wage becomes nearly unattainable. Within the tavern, each action requires careful consideration. She must assess who poses a threat, who is munificent, who is frugal yet harmless, and who is both rich and perilous. She is compelled to appease certain patrons. She must also politely refuse others without inciting anger, and discern temperaments more swiftly than anyone else present. Agreements with the tavern owner differ. Some women lease a bed or a private chamber and retain the majority of their earnings. Others receive a meager portion, with the bulk of the income going to the proprietor. The most dire circumstances ensnare women in perpetual debt. Expenses for sustenance, lodging, and attire are recorded on a running tab. These figures continuously mount, rendering the prospect of ever settling that account nothing more than a bitter jest. Violence is an ever-present reality. Within these confines, genuine protection is absent. Should a customer decline to pay, who would intervene to collect on her behalf? The tavern owner might intercede if the man is a notorious troublemaker and not worth antagonizing, or conversely, he might instruct her to absorb the loss and continue her labor. If a patron assaults her, she could even be held responsible for instigating the attack. Illness represents yet another unseen peril. In this setting, no one comprehends infection, and dependable protection is absent. Sexually transmitted diseases propagate effortlessly. Certain ailments lead to sores and discomfort, while others progressively damage joints, eyesight, or mental faculties. Numerous women perish prematurely following years dedicated to this profession. Their bodies, worn out and incurably infected, frequently experience pregnancy. Contraception proves unreliable and often hazardous, with herbs employed to avert or terminate gestation can poison the mother. Moreover, bringing a child to full term offers no assurance of survival. In the medieval era, childbirth stands as a primary cause of mortality. Nevertheless, even within these circumstances, not all is despair. Some women manage to forge a delicate influence. A shrewd courtesan, supported by devoted clients, can select her patrons. She is able to accumulate confidential information. Who is contemplating a perilous undertaking? Who is being unfaithful to his spouse? Who is devising an illicit act? Men speak openly in intimate settings, allowing details to escape. An astute woman might leverage this intelligence to safeguard herself or enhance her standing. A select few, possessing uncommon fortune and ability, ultimately rise to become madams, managing their own establishments, thereby abandoning direct sex work. However, this represents a challenging, restricted route, one that the majority never complete. As evening progresses, alcohol diminishes discretion. In a medieval culture of honor, the distinction between a jocular slight and a capital offense blurs. Utterances hold significant power. If one is labeled a swindler, a craven, or if their family is impugned, that blemish persists. Men contend to preserve their reputations. An individual perceived as yielding becomes an effortless mark subsequently, in commerce and everyday existence. Observe how swiftly events unfold. One participant charges another with using weighted dice. Initially, the accused person chuckles, but his grin vanishes upon realizing every person at the table is observing. He cannot permit the accusation to remain unchallenged. He stands, his hand gripping his knife firmly. Voices escalate, chairs drag across the floor, and other patrons turn their gaze. The innkeeper perceives the change. He is familiar with this sequence of events. He places the pitcher down and approaches, his eyes fixed on the men as he deliberates his options. Intervene prematurely, and he risks alienating paying patrons. Delay too long, and gore will stain his floor. The initial push connects. A goblet overturns, someone utters an expletive, and a chair topples. Instantly, the altercation expands. One man's companion stands to assist. The adversary of another individual intervenes, fueled by a grievance from the previous week. A drunken person, scarcely aware of the conflict's origin, observes the commotion and delivers a blow simply to participate. Knives are drawn. These are not refined sword duels, but brief, savage stabs delivered at close quarters. Individual seize any available object, a low seat, a pitcher, a fireplace tool. An individual flings a brimming tankard at someone's cranium. Should it strike, it possesses the force to fracture bone. Women react quickly. Some duck to avoid danger, while others pull precious belongings behind the counter. A handful intervene with unexpected vigor, brandishing ladles or rolling pins at heads to quell disturbances, jeopardizing their earnings. Within a crowded chamber, a melee is utter pandemonium. One might attempt to halt the conflict and yet still receive a strike from the rear. The floor, already slippery from spilled beverages, turns perilous once blood becomes part of the amalgamation. If an individual collapses and fails to rise, there's no halt. Bodies are inevitably trodden upon. Ultimately, one of three scenarios brings it to a close. The innkeeper and their staff either subdue everyone or eject sufficient individuals to disrupt the conflict. Alternatively, local patrons determine the brawl harms their establishment and confront the instigators. Or, the entrance is forced open and external authority intervenes. This authority could be a constable accompanied by assistants, private security employed by a neighboring guild, lord, or religious institution, or even a detachment of soldiers. These forces are more concerned with quelling disorder than rendering impartial verdicts. Formal legal systems in the medieval era are convoluted. Officials frequently possess extensive theoretical powers. However, their practical backing is often insufficient. While they can apprehend individuals, locating someone within a dimly lit, packed tavern proves challenging. Witnesses either fabricate stories or remain mute. Numerous participants in the altercation have already departed. Should a person be found deceased on the ground, the situation escalates significantly. That corpse transforms a mere tavern fight into a judicial issue. Who delivered the lethal strike? Was it an act of self-preservation? Was the deceased person of consequence? In such cases, social standing often outweighs factual accuracy. If an impoverished outsider perishes, a minor penalty might be imposed, at best, and life proceeds. If, however, a well-regarded local or an individual with influential ties is slain, the authorities pursue the matter with greater intensity. A man accused could be subjected to beatings until he admits guilt. And even if he wasn't the one who dealt the fatal blow, he might face execution by hanging or another capital punishment to demonstrate the maintenance of order. The ecclesiastical institution holds a distinct perspective. Clergy members label taverns as dens of iniquity. From their pulpits, they issue warnings against excessive drinking, carnal desires, and aggression. Nevertheless, certain priests themselves partake in libations within these very establishments after nightfall. Some possess properties that house inns, and others hear confessions the following morning from the same individuals with whom they shared drinks. The previous evening, guilds introduce an additional dimension. Tavern proprietors, brewers, wine merchants, and innkeepers might be affiliated with structured associations. These organizations establish regulations and safeguard their constituents. A guild possesses the capacity to influence officials, represent a member in legal proceedings, or impose internal sanctions. Their concern is less with ethical rectitude. Instead, they prioritize consistent commerce and public standing. Beneath all these layers, the most potent rule within the tavern remains the proprietor's discretion. He determines which party he supports in a disagreement. He makes the choice of either surrendering a suspect to law enforcement or feigning unawareness. He establishes discreet arrangements with criminals and those who gamble. You may conduct your activities here, but refrain from targeting my regular patrons and avoid attracting undue attention. He provides illicit payments when necessary and extends complimentary beverages to influential individuals. This is done to maintain their goodwill. Within this intricate network of formal regulations, ecclesiastical warnings, guild statutes, and pub traditions, justice is not a straightforward notion. It is swayed by wealth, apprehension, and relationships. Numerous transgressions go unpunished, while certain minor infractions provoke a harsh reaction. As the evening progresses, the hearth fire diminishes, and the singing either subsides or devolves into indistinct murmurs. Individually, people succumb to exhaustion at tables, beneath seating, or on staircases. Some laboriously make their way to communal sleeping quarters upstairs, while others totter out into the thoroughfare. There, the frigid, nocturnal atmosphere affects them more profoundly than any physical blow. Gradually, the inn transitions from pandemonium back to tranquility. At daybreak, the entrance reveals an altered vista. The stench lingers, yet the clamor has ceased. A serving girl gathers rushes into heaps, revealing scattered bones, broken goblets, and fabric remnants. Unidentifiable items are tossed into pails. Later, new rushes will conceal everything, interring the previous night's events beneath a fresh stratum. In a corner, a man snores. A boot prods him, confirming he's still breathing. If merely intoxicated, he's left to awaken naturally. However, if he's injured or unresponsive, the atmosphere shifts. No one desires a belated discovery of a deceased person. Such a finding prompts inquiries, so bodies are swiftly relocated to a church entrance, a private residence, or the thoroughfare beyond, where another individual might stumble upon them. The innkeeper tallies figures on a slate or wax tablet. A cask, previously half-filled, is now almost depleted, a clear gain. 2 pitchers, however, are shattered. This represents a deficit. A window pane is fractured, and a bench lost to support during the altercation. He records those who still have outstanding debts from the previous evening. Some individuals are no longer present. Those patrons have departed. He assesses everything: the revenue from beverages and meals versus the potential for harm, injuries, or fatalities. If the ledger leans in his favor, the establishment endures for another 24 hours. Should too many unprofitable evenings accumulate, his business will fail. The female staff here cleanse themselves as thoroughly as possible. They conceal contusions with fabric in their hair, repair ripped garments, and endeavor to shed recollections of the most unpleasant patrons and the chilling dread of the most dire instances. There is no alternative. The sole recourse is resilience and the expectation that this evening will prove less challenging. Throughout the settlement, information circulates. Individuals converse at water sources and marketplaces. In workshops, discussions revolve around who engaged in fisticuffs with whom, who suffered significant losses at gambling, who acted foolishly, and who shared intimate company. Esteem is gained or lost based on these narratives. A skilled artisan who settled a companion's gaming obligation could be lauded for his faithfulness, while a trader who declined to compensate the waitress might be silently scorned. A traveler on a holy journey who overindulged in drink and boasted of counterfeit holy objects could discover opportunities denied to him. The day progresses and labor persists. Yet even as the sun ascends, thoughts already turn towards dusk, to the warmth of the hearth, the flavor of spirits, the excitement of diversions, and the prospect of companionship. This opportunity to momentarily escape a monotonous, arduous existence for a brief period explains why medieval inns persist, notwithstanding their squalor. Despite the perils and the ethical alarm they generate, these establishments provide people with what few other venues can offer simultaneously: sustenance, beverages, and refuge. They offer employment, intelligence, intimacy, peril, and a means of evasion. Legal authorities utilize them as observation points, and the ecclesiastical institution employs them as deterrent illustrations. They also serve as origins for penitent contributions. Traders, military personnel, religious travelers, and residents alike depend on them for commerce, employment, and current events. The entire societal structure relies upon these smoke-filled chambers, even as it feigns superiority. Centuries later, structures evolve. Open hearths are replaced by enclosed stoves. Games of chance relocate to licensed gambling establishments, and sex workers operate under distinct regulations. Health ordinances and law enforcement surveillance redefine communal areas. Nevertheless, if one enters a bustling pub or nightclub this evening, a medieval voyager would still recognize certain aspects. Strangers continue to congregate, seeking to drown out fear and tedium with drink, and individuals persist in wagering their money. They also gamble with their standing and connections. Altercations still break out due to affronts, envy, and inebriated arrogance, while laborers still squander their earnings during a single boisterous evening. Proprietors continue to weigh potential gains against hazards, observing the establishment with keen vigilance. This, rather than the romanticized portrayal, represents the true heritage of the medieval public house. It's not the idyllic image of a comfortable inn where champions sing and celebrate, but the stark, disquieting reality of people facing duress, seeking solace in venues that simultaneously offer aid and cause ruin.